Happy Halloween, folks. After 4 years, the Interloper ARG has come to a conclusion. This is one that I've been following relatively early on. I would always check in when there were new parts, and I would even watch a couple videos covering what wasn't shown on the main channel. I always really loved it because it just had such a high technical prestige as well. It just had such a unique eye for unique and engaging horror in the source engine. And I have been wanting to talk about it, but it's been really hard to put the series into a coherent thought. It felt like there hasn't been enough pieces for me to put it together. And to, like a format like this. So I thought I would wait for the ending to see what that brings to me, to see if that would get anything going. And what happened is that the ending broke almost all of my expectations and made me see the series in an almost entirely different way. And I'd like to talk about that. If you aren't familiar, Interloper is a source engine ARG created by the YouTuber Anomidae. The hook of the series is him discovering an old Half-Life 2 forum thread. Someone posts about weird graffiti they found on the first map of Ravenholm, and it leads to the discovery of a strange command that seems to generate demo files on the fly. I'm going to leave it at that because I think this really is a series that should be watched. I'm not going to be giving an outright summary of it, and I don't think what I say here is enough to supplement a full watch. As well, I think Anomi just deserves to be supported because this is a series that I think clearly has had a lot of time and effort put into it, especially since it has taken so long to be finished, but it has been really worth it. It's funny, when I imagined talking about this series, I thought I would kind of be doing a very in-depth thing, going over each and every detail in every episode, and talking about how it contributes to the ending, but the ending made it a lot easier for me to kind of make this something that isn't as exhaustive as that type of format. I think an important thing to clarify is anytime I call Anomidae Anomi, from this point on, it will be referring to his character in the ARG. They are separate people, the creator and the character. I just thought it was necessary to say that so there wasn't any confusion going into this. One important thing that Interloper F, the finale, does to the series is that it recontextualizes a lot of what we previously knew and gives us new information that Anomi had hidden previously, and that information gives a lot for us to look into his motivations as a character. One thing I have to say is there are 3 of these recontextualizations, and one of them I don't particularly like. I've heard someone call this retconning, and while I don't agree with that at all, I think this one recontextualization is one that I think kind of borders on that. This is the idea that Anomi faked the interlope.h command to give a fake timer to prevent the knowledge of the exploit he used in Interloper 2. And I just think it feels like an unnecessary change. I feel like the only thing it truly does is service the notion that Anomi is untrustworthy. Which I think I can kind of understand with the context that this is the first recontextualization shown, so I think it makes sense for it to have the purpose of sowing seeds of distrust before starting to peel back what his character motivations are. And I will say it's not all bad. I think it does hint a little bit towards what his final decision is for the demo void. Because the reason why Anomi chose to hide this information wasn't necessarily for a malicious reason. And to be specific, the information is that at the end of Interloper 2, during the portal Type 5, it was quote-unquote interrupted by the server disconnecting because the timer was gone. However, what happened in reality was that Anomidae tried a exploit that was previously tested to disconnect your PC from the network while a Type 5 demo is running. And that's what produces the results we see in Interloper 2. And I think this decision can hint a little bit towards his motivations at the end that motivate his final decision, because his final decision ultimately is, at least in his mind, towards the preservation of the demo void and towards bad actors getting access to it. But I think we'll leave more discussion of the actual ending itself for later. However, I think these other notes that are given service the finale very well. And by notes, I mean that the way these are given is presented like this is a slideshow created by the rest of Project Skybox, exposing Anomi's misdoings during this investigation. This one is kind of crazy. But throughout Interloper F, there's sort of two videos happening at once. One is Interloper F, created and edited by Anomidae. And the other is this Project Skybox video, and it cuts between them both constantly. And I think it's a really unique format, and the interesting thing is that a lot of the more substantial videos shown in the finale later on come from this slideshow made by Project Skybox. Anyways though, these other notes point towards Anomidae working towards a larger goal than what he ever put on in his videos. One of these notes shows that in Sky Crash, he cut out a significant portion of footage, and one that is a significant finding. In the video, we see him come across this weird floating map out in the distance. He cuts before he moves on, but he cut out footage of him going inside of that distant map. And what he found was a ghost of himself, playing back him jumping around this old TF2 server hub map. And you can tell this interaction really resonated with him, as it would anybody. And we don't particularly have the full context of this, but later we are given another note, and that is the true reason that Anomidae used his own old save file in Gmod for investigation. And this is because he sort of has this gut feeling that the source void is somehow connected to his previous experiences in the source engine. And he felt that using this save file might kind of bring out that energy more. And another note given only points to this further. During Interloper 4, when the stream crashed, the Portal RTX window outputted an image that he never shared. This image was a fuzzy, compressed recreation of one of his own screenshots from Counter-Strike Source. So from very early on in the series, Anomidae had some idea that his own memories in the Source engine were somehow out there in whatever it was he was investigating. And it's clear that that motivation pushed him pretty far, especially as we'll see in the events that have transpired since Interloper E. Now, what we build to is potentially my all-time favorite sequence in this whole series. So, Anomidae got this glimpse. He got this glimpse into his past. A place where he can relive previous memories if he could only find the way. And so he does digging. He looks through the Sourcebox application he has and tries to find out in what way it relates to the Source games he owns. And eventually, through a lot of trial and error, through demo generation, through use of the Xbox emulator, once again, through clicking around on these stupid geometry-based buttons in this esoteric piece of software, he cracks the code. By, I kid you not, by inputting a spray into fucking Counter-Strike Source and spraying it on the wall, he can then generate a code of different Half-Life 2 sound effects. What he can do with these sound effects is go into a controller room, play the sound effects in order, and then, on his Xbox, he'll be transported to where that screenshot was taken. And we get a couple vignettes through this. One is a screenshot from the Gmod Idiot Box, the first episode of Gmod Idiot Box. And we see through this Xbox emulator, it is a exact recreation of that moment. I'm not sure how exact it is, but it's close enough to get across the point. Then he uses one of his own screenshots in a single-player world. It's a physics-based house destruction map, and you can sort of see it in this state of disarray. Clearly the screenshot was taken after he had destroyed the house. And then the third one is curious. He puts up a screenshot from a server he had previously played on. And he goes through the map once again, kind of, sort of in a similar way that he went through the Idiot Box and Physics House map. He sort of goes through it with just this kind of like, sort of wonder, and just sort of tours the viewer around the map, showing it off like he just installed it from the workshop and thinks it's neat. But what happens here is that he sees a ghost of himself again. And that's when the tour ends. And when we check back with him, he has been obsessively drawing castle turrets for days. And you can kind of gather what's happening. He's trying to go somewhere he doesn't have any documentation of. And he's been trying. And eventually, he gets a hit. He is transported to this floating castle in the void. And he walks to the edge of the tower he spawns in. There's no bridge between where he's standing and the next tower over. He's trapped on the other side. He only has a crowbar, so he has no movement to get over. What he views and what we can barely make out are two player models, and we see the chat going off. The chat boils down to a conversation between two people talking about making this map, and it sort of being a shared activity for them. Either one of them has made, I think, either Inomi has made it for this person who is named Colum, or it is something that they sort of made together. And they sort of send these kind of corny but sweet goodnight messages. And then it disconnects. And we don't hear Inomi at all throughout this. And I can only assume he's in some sort of shock. And the next time we see him, he's figured out how to type into the chat of these demos. So I think the clear thing is that this is his motivation. This singular moment, this singular conversation we see, this map, this is what he's been working towards. This is what he's been working towards. He's been working to relive memories that he has no documentation of, things that he can never experience again. And as is alluded to in the ending of the video, people he can't speak with again. And it makes me curious, what does he think will happen when he chats? Does he think that he'll get a response? Does he think he can alter the course of time? Does he just want to scream out into the literal void to try and get something across. But it doesn't matter. We see him figure this out. And then the next time he goes into this memory, it's corrupted. He comes back with an RPG from TF2 and he rocket jumps across the chasm. But something is wrong. The conversation on the left is looping over and over between two messages. We see in the turret the player models on the floor. There's a model of one of the pods Anomie sent out, glitching around this model, moving around it in a circle, as if pointing to it. And then Anomie turns around and the other player model has fused with one of these pods. This is a hell of his own creation. What this is saying is clear. The destruction and distortion we see is caused by these objects that Anomie sent out into the demo void for the purpose of discovery and experimentation, but ended up just polluting and leaving this ruined impact on the demo void. Even if these pods left a slight impact, it still was one that is negative. And that's clearly reflected in these player models' destruction being caused by these pods. And then the other player model flies towards Anomie. He blasts it with a rocket launcher and it falls off into the void. And as he looks down to see where it is, it comes back around the other way and gets him, and it crashes. Once again, not a single word from him. Oh, and when the other player model is fused with the pod, it says, "I'm gone." This is, I think, potentially the most impactful moment of this series to me. And it's what kind of told me that this is really going to be something different. In the past, Anomie's history with the Source engine was treated as set dressing. It was treated as, you know, him kind of being qualified to talk about this and investigate it, and sort of being a reason for him being interested. And now that set dressing is used for his primary character conflict. This scene tells you everything. He lost a friend. Or perhaps something more. I've seen people theorize that, and I can get behind it, but I don't know if there's enough evidence here to fully make that conclusion. But he lost someone. And all he wants to do is to see them again. To see the moments that they shared. To potentially even reach out to them. Somewhere beyond the void. And what he realizes is that these efforts are moot. Anything he tries will just destroy what his goal is. And after this moment, we get to see a plan roll out. However, before I talk about what builds up to the ending of Interloper, I would like to take a little bit of a detour to talk about the technical aspects of the demo void and what's going on. Starting off, I would like to talk about the primary supernatural force in Interloper. Dynamic NPCs. The funny thing is, I thought DM NPCs would be way more central to the ending than they were. In my mind, the ending of the series was Anomie getting his hands on the canceled DM editor program and figuring out what the hell they are. But we never got that kind of closure. However, I think the information we're given is enough for us to put these dynamic NPCs into a new context. So in the past, it's been tough for me to think about where dynamic NPCs live. Is it within demos? Is it within the demo void? Or is it just some kind of farce, some type of feedback that doesn't really mean anything and doesn't really exist anymore. And what I've found is that it's almost a combination of all of those, and it's weird. So my big theory is that we have this demo void. This is preserving all of this source engine data. Now, I'm not going to get on who I think owns it or anything like that, because I think that's a whole other thing to bring up in a moment. But it's recording all of these source players' movements and chat inputs and everything. And dynamic NPCs were some type of attempt by somebody to make an more interactive experience, a more seamless experience for doing stuff, for player interaction. So in the lore of Interloper, DM NPCs were something that were never released. However, we do have something. We have this write-up on the Project Skybox website. This is never mentioned in any of the main channel videos, by the way. We have this write-up on the Project Skybox website about a mysterious company who gave this tape at a conference called Digivisions with weird, primitive, and creepy 3D animations that went on for 2 hours. Now, I think this is the same company that made DM NPCs. And I think this company is FSky. What we know about FSky is that there's some type of server host, and that they are deeply involved with whatever's happening in the demo void. There are constant mentions of their name. It's clear that they're working on some type of map generation system. So I don't think it's out of the question to think that FSky are the people who made DM NPCs. Now, my thought is that when FSky were creating these DM NPCs, the source engine classifies them as players. And they did this on purpose so that there were further actions they could take with programming their behavior. And what this means to me is that demos of DM NPCs are treated the same as demos of players. And I believe that FSky found some sort of way to harness the demo void to train their machine learning for their map generator and their DM NPCs. However, because these demos are preserved for so long, and because these DM NPCs are very experimental and sort of easy to break, I think that they were never tested to see how they last long term. And here's my little crazy jump in logic. So my thought is that DM NPCs, in the short couple of minutes they're meant to be running, are meant to sort of pick up on clues from their environment and have some sort of machine learning algorithm to process those inputs and internalize them in a certain way. However, because they are lasting so long, for months, for years, for decades, they are just getting way too much input data. More than their systems were ever designed to handle or intended to use. And it's causing them to act like they're self-aware. Or maybe they are. The latter is more fun to think because this is a supernatural unfiction series. We see something in the ending of Interloper F that I think gives a little bit more context towards the rest of the series and towards one of the primary mysteries. We see Sky Ghost's last moments. We see what she saw before she died. And what we see is this very artistic representation of her death. This very, it's just very fantastical. It's abstract. It takes from a lot of different things. And we never even see the true moment of her death. We never see Anomi literally killing her. We just sort of see this almost final dream before the end. And that makes me think what we saw from Sky Ghost is a Type 5 demo. Type 5 demos are the last moments of DM NPCs telegraphed. Now, who is the Umbrella Man? I think the Umbrella Man is a really simple explanation. I think it's just some sort of automated software or algorithm designed to end these processes. Sort of like a garbage collector in a code compiler. It sees that these processes have been running too long, or that their size is too big, or anything like that, and it just needs to go delete the process. But because the DM NPCs are pretty much self-aware, this is them getting killed. And what we see in Type 5 demos is just that. It's what we see from Sky Ghost. Now, Sky Ghost is a unique case because her death sequence is very fantastical, but I think it mostly has to do with the means of her death and the fact that she was flash nuked. I think that means that there was a lot more messed up in her perception before she died. So I think that solves one thing, at least for me. But what about the demo void itself? So my big thing again is that this is kind of a stupidly simple explanation, but I think the demo void is just some sort of scrapped feature by Valve that somehow kept on going on Forgotten Server Rack. It's a pretty simple explanation because I just don't think that the demo void itself has that big of a reason for existing. All it really is a large collection of automatically recorded demos formatted in one large 3D space. And my thought is that F-Sky found some way to backdoor into this, and they sort of made it their home. And I like this interpretation a lot because it says a lot on a sort of cycle in the series that I'm going to get into once I'm done talking about more technical aspects of this series. But I think F-Sky sort of made themselves comfortable. They found this large resource that they can use to further research and develop their machine learning algorithms. And that's what DM NPCs are, and that's what the map generation is. It's their attempts to develop cutting-edge machine learning. And I think a lot of the demos are from attempts at this. I think the reason why there are so many Type 1 demos is because F-Sky did so many attempts at creating DM NPCs and creating data and testing that it just polluted the demo void with all of these extra demos that meant nothing. That's why actual gameplay demos are so difficult to find, is because the shit from actual players is just buried and drowned out by all of these garbage machine-generated, tested demos. Now, I think there is a lot to say in how this contributes to a lot of the context in the series, but first, I think we need to actually talk about what happens in the ending and what that really means. So, in the ending, Anomi works with Lucy while withholding lots of information to locate Sky Ghost. And then he carries out this incredibly complex plan to get to Sky Ghost and kill her. Since Anomi found Sky Ghost on the Xbox version of the game, he has access to the flash nuke glitch. And he uses it multiple times to kill Sky Ghost. And this scene is a little bit brutal. Sky Ghost makes multiple sounds during it that almost feel like a signal, almost feel like some sort of cry out. And Anomie barely flinches. He just continues until the emulator crashes and Sky Ghost is gone. And what he does after this is he flash nukes the entrance that he has to the demo void until it crashes. And he leaves it at that. Now, there's a lot to say about this ending. I think, first of all, the character motivations for Anomie are clear. In a long ending text crawl, Anomie gives his reason for doing this. He says that he wanted to preserve the demo void, that he didn't want other people to come in and ruin what has been preserved for decades. Memories of the source engine. I think another strong motivation clearly is some sort of frustration or an exasperation that he cannot relive the memories he wants to without destroying them. And this sort of decision comes from those feelings. And I definitely understand both sides of this. Because I think one thing is that I understand his intended goal of preservation and trying to keep what's here safe from people who might not know what they're doing, like him and like Ida. And I also understand sort of why he got into this emotional spot, that he maybe didn't want other people to live through what he lived through. Seeing someone who they've lost reanimated, and before they can even decide how they feel about it, it gets snatched right away. On the other hand, this is such an irresponsible thing to do. So first of all, he killed Sky Ghost, which I'm not sure how to feel about that, because I'm not sure what Anomie thinks Sky Ghost is. I don't know if he thinks Sky Ghost is sentient or if he thinks she's some bad piece of code. I don't know what he thinks of her. So it's hard to gauge how I feel about Anomie killing her. But with the sort of fantasticism that Anomie has looked at other aspects through, it's hard for me to think that he hasn't made the leap that DM NPCs aren't just NPCs, especially since he closely followed the Eida-Machinima Archive and has seen the lengths that Ida has gone through to try and get these DM NPCs to be his companion. So on one hand, I can understand if Anomie doesn't think that Sky Ghost is sentient, but on the other hand, I think there's enough for him to draw that conclusion pretty easily, and I think he should be the type to draw that conclusion. Secondly, I don't know what other fucking damage he did to the demo void. He blew up this entrance, but what other damage would that have done? In his attempt to preserve it, it seems like he might have just damaged it more. And as well, it seems irrational to have the motivation of preserving something, and then your effort is to destroy access to it. While I understand the motivations that Anomie laid out, I think it's pretty clear to me that he was acting almost completely on his own frustration and feelings of loss. And I don't blame him, but it makes it hard for me to say that this was the right move for him to take. And that is the end of Interloper. There's a lot of smaller things to talk about, like talking about the Eida-Machinima Archive, or various smaller through lines that weren't the most relevant in the final episode, but are still relevant to the series as a whole. But I think that this, for me, is the best way to talk about the series. And in general, I kind of view it on the same level as Petscop in my mind. It really is something special. And I really have to congratulate Anomidae for going through with creating this and executing it as well as he did. I think one genius thing about this series is the way that the first video is sort of formatted like a typical lost media exploration. I think that really played with the line between fiction and reality. Now, I think by the time the second video came up, it was very clearly fiction, but it definitely played with me the first time I saw it. So I'm just gonna have to thank Anomidae and anybody else who contributed to the Interloper project on the series. And I am seriously very excited for his next project, Wanderstuck. And I would recommend it if you enjoyed Interloper. And I would recommend it to anybody watching, because I'm sure it's going to be something of high quality. So that's all. Maybe I'll make a video on Wanderstuck in the future, but that might not be until it finishes like this, because I don't want to look like a fool and not have the full picture. I like talking about things that are finished. I think that's what I'm getting at. So I hope you enjoyed watching this. I hope you had a happy Halloween. And goodbye.